Hello there. So nice to meet you. I'm Niels. I'm 4,000 miles away, but that shouldn't prevent us from being together. So nice to meet all my APA colleagues. Now, what I'm going to talk about in my presentation is the amazing possibilities of applying psychology on a worldwide scale. In my case, I'll give you an example because I've been spreading attachment-based care learning in 26 countries around the world. So the perspective I'll give you is a global one. The group I'm working with, I'll also talk about, and that's the kids who needs us most. It's children without parental care. But first, let me thank the APA Committee on International Relations in Psychology for awarding me the 2020 International Humanitarian Award for underserved populations. To me, it feels like coming home because my parents were Danish and I live in Denmark, but in fact I was born in New Haven in 1952. My dad had a scholarship. So I'm 50% American. That means nothing is impossible. And I'm 50% Danish, which means that social responsibility and caring for each other is very important to me. So that's my professional DNA, and I appreciate that very much. I left New Haven when I was 6 months old, so I don't have many memories. But nevertheless, America was part of my childhood. Well, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the amazing possibilities of online learning, training, supervision. I think our profession is moving from local to global mindsets, at least in my case. You know, we used to have individual therapies, one therapist and someone on the couch talking for hours, maybe years. Then we moved to short-time therapies. We have a whole host of them. And now we are moving into the amazing world of digital dissemination. So my own career reflects that. I started when I was young, in 1981, I started as a family therapist. But then after a year, I had a job in a therapeutic institution for 36 very deprived, very maltreated, sexually abused children between 7 and 16. And that was a mind-breaking event for me, because I could see that these were children I simply couldn't understand. They had no conscience, they had no love, they had no idea of other people. And the staff were overwhelmed because these children were violent and very difficult to control. So I was amazed. But at one point I started doing some research in the background of these children, and I started training staff. So where I ended up today is that I created the Fairstart Foundation. Our mission is to transform international research in children in care into online classrooms and training programs for any country or any NGO or government. And we also make training programs in local language versions. So now we have educated 500 instructors from 26 countries, from Japan to Chile, and they have trained the caregivers of some 40,000 children, thanks to blended learning, which I'll talk about. So this example is just to inspire you and show you all the possibilities of online learning, which I think are simply amazing. Okay. Now, if we look at the specific group I'm working with, children without parents, then we get to the point where we ask ourselves, why is mental health such a global issue today? It's one of the most important things. And I think it's because our social networks are deteriorating. At least they are changing very fast. We have climate change, we have poverty, we have migration, which means that this has created 70 million refugee children around the world. Every day, 30,000 people, according to UN, become refugees. And half of those are children. And when I look at my experience, so many parents simply have to give up because of poverty, not because they want to lose their children. Because we have 3 million children in orphanages today. We have just as many in foster care, and we have an unknown number of street children with no care at all. And 8 out of 10 of those kids, in fact, have live parents who were forced to give them up. You know what's happening in Venezuela and Honduras, and you have refugees at the border. We have the same in Europe. What people do is that they leave their small social network villages because industrialization has made their work obsolete. And then they move into cities, and that affects their social networks. Urbanized families today are small, they are stressed, and they are very often disrupted. I mean, in Denmark, we have a divorce rate of 52% during the first 5 years of marriage, right? And we have 1/3 of Danish parents are single parents. So divorce rates soar, loneliness explodes, homelessness. Even in Denmark, we have a lot of young people in the streets. Mental illness is prevailing, and addiction is also rife because one thing that social isolation creates is addiction, and so do loss and separations. Did you know, for example, that just to take one country, 1 million Americans died between 2006 and 2016 from opioid overdoses? Yeah. And 1 in 5 American women use opioids during pregnancy. So we have a lot of mental suffering, which gives us a lot of different problems, and it destroys families. In the case of the US, foster care and institutions have been simply overwhelmed by endless number of kids who lost or whose parents lost parental care. So here we have a population which, when they grow up, if they are illiterate, if they don't know what attachment is, we have a bomb for the future. And I think the number of childbirths is falling around the world. So in 2050, we'll have 4 times as many 80 years old and very, very few newborn children. So we have to take care of those we have, especially those who grow up without parents. Now, I wrote this book. It's called Severe Attachment in Childhood. It was just a practical guide. I mean, I'd written some books in Danish, but I didn't think very much about it. But in 1 year, it was in 12 languages. I think it's in 14 now. So I saw a tremendous need for our knowledge, and I was appalled that it simply didn't affect any care systems in the world. Now, I was invited to lecture around the world, Chile, Indonesia, all of Europe, God knows where. And every time I went somewhere, I asked to see some of the orphanages or foster care systems. And I could see one reason why children in care do so poorly in life, because only half of them ever pass the 9th grade or get a job. They become drug addicts. They have miserable lives. They are abused. So that reason was that nobody cared for the caregivers. I mean, they were overworked. They had no access to education, supervision. They were often isolated. They had no organizational development, no workplace improvements. They were underpaid. And first and foremost, they were overwhelmed by uncountable numbers of children. Last year I was in Mexico, in Tijuana, visited an orphanage. And well, one of the places I saw, 28 newborn babies, 2 caregivers around the clock. I mean, what's going to happen to those children when they grow up? And what's going to happen to their mental state? So after this gigantic tour around the world, I was on a plane on my way home, and I started fantasizing. What if I can gather a network of international researchers and use our joint knowledge to make online-based educations in how to train caregivers? And so this was a crazy idea because it was just something I was thinking about in my spare time. And what I can see is that all of these uneducated caregivers, they simply produce deprived children. I mean, if you think of the children in Romanian and Bulgarian orphanages who were discovered in the 90s, that was horrible. And that was because of the staff mindset. You know, don't touch them, let them stay in beds. Don't make personal relations with children. No play or activities during the day, and no contact with the outside world. So I don't know who were most traumatized, the staff or the kids. Anyway, that simply produced kids who didn't look like kids should do. Now this idea grew in my mind, and I made a 4-step plan. First was to invite a network of international researchers and ask them what are the best care practices for orphanage and foster care children. Then transform our knowledge into online classroom educations, and then make partnerships with governments, agencies, and NGOs. Also to provide the students we educate with training programs adjusted to local culture and in local language, and always with local videos. Because if you want to make intercultural interventions, you've got to study and respect the culture you're working in. And I mean, attachment theory is universal. Attachment is. But if you don't adjust it to the local culture, they simply won't take it in. So my idea was to use bigger organizations as leverage for spreading psychology knowledge. And I was appalled by the positive responses from colleagues and researchers around the world. Charles Siena from Tulane University, Isai Roderman from Marmara University in Istanbul, Bo Winnerljung, Sweden, Mary Dosia, René Huxbergen, Sat Cooper, South Africa, Sheila Blumen from Chile, Marinus van Isendorf, Famidjo, for all those people who had studied it. In fact, when I made the first project, I had a phone call from Japan. That was a psychiatry professor called Kamikado Katsuhiro from Nagano University. He said, "Can I come and see you?" And he came for 3 days. And he spent a whole year translating the whole program and putting it on the university website in Japanese. I mean, that's colleagues for you. So my thanks to all of them. Then I spent a year ordering these studies in epigenetic studies, child brain development, relations and attachment studies, caregiver group dynamics, foster family dynamics, and intercultural interventions. And the question I asked always my colleagues was, how does your research point to the best care practices for children between 0 and 18? They came up with, or I summed up their answers. There are 4 principles for children in care, 4 environmental conditions which must be present. It doesn't matter very much if it's a foster family or an orphanage or whatever it is, but it has to have these qualities. The first is, you must provide a long-term, secure attachment to a few caregivers. And that attachment must be unbroken. The more you move children around, the more you sever the bonds between them and their caregivers, the poorer is their life. The second is, children have to have a long-term membership of a group of peers, because that's where you learn all the social skills and prepare your social adult network. And not many are aware of this, but that's in fact just as important. Now, the third condition is that caregivers must be regularly educated and supported. You know, as psychologists, we always talk about a caregiver's past. What kind of, the adult attachment interview and what kind of trauma they had as children and how they got over them, resolved or unresolved. But what is equally important is this caregiver socially isolated, or does this caregiver participate in a social network? So one of my plans was to make very strong caregiver groups and very strong groups for the students who worked to train them. If you look at social isolation for caregivers, as soon as you isolate them, violence will increase, the state of mind will become unstable in the caregiver, and you see abuse and a lot of other things. So any social unit has to have a constant communication with its environment, right? And secure attachment trickles down from staff relations to relations to children. So the ability to care for a child depends very much on your workplace quality. That was another aspect which was important for the program. And the fourth condition is that you mustn't have children who are put into loyalty conflicts. I mean, if parents divorce and keep arguing, you can see the child's school performance just go down and stay down as long as they are in conflict. If you look at the relation between, for example, social workers and their foster families, it all depends on what kind of relation do they have and do they agree. So a child must live in a place where there's a whole group of people who agree on how they see the child, how they need it, and who don't fight over it. So those are summing up the 4 most important conditions for a good environment for kids. Now, I was ready to start, so I hooked up with the Danish Social School of Care and Health, and we made 2 European Union projects from 2008 to 2012. And we found partner organizations in Denmark, Latvia, Poland, Russia, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Spain, Greece, and Italy. And we worked with them for years, designing educations for their staff and testing the training. Now, this was a point where I was ready to go back to my daily work as a consultant. I'm an adoptive consultant for the Danish state, and I train people all around Denmark, but not so. Because a lot of organizations from other countries, first was one NGO from Indonesia who asked us to make programs there. So I spent a lot of wonderful time in Bali with wonderful people, training orphanage leaders, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, secular, SOS, whatever. and we made a language version in Bahasa for them. But it wasn't very effective, me going around the world all the time and training people. So in 2012, I co-founded the Fairstart Foundation. And what we did there was to design online classrooms. I don't know if you know edX. It was made by Harvard and MIT, and it's a platform for university educations. And the software is free. So we spent a year and a half building this education in how to train caregivers for staff. And it's just great because students can give each other peer feedback. You can register questionnaires. We do that, the development of caregivers, their life quality during the 6 months where we train them. We can monitor the mental state of every child before and after. And students can communicate with each other. And we can sit here in Denmark and supervise them every day and support them and help them. So that's what we do. I had to revise Bowlby's idea of attachment, or rather the setting, a little, because Bowlby lived in a time where the mother and the child were in focus, right? So his theory is very much from that perspective. But I was working with non-parental caregivers, so I kind of adjusted it to the group perspective. And I did that by defining the secure group instead of the secure caregiver. The secure group is a group where members can share their own childhood separation experiences freely in an atmosphere of mutual trust. And that's what we teach our instructors. You've got to develop this group into a trusting group and an open group. So they must support each other, and that will also mean that they can make work plans at the end of each training session. When you have a topic like how do you meet children with insecure attachment, then they make a plan at the end of the session, and they go home and practice and come back and discuss how it worked. Because in Fairstart, everybody is a designer of general knowledge, but the way they practice it is up to them. So during this 6 months process, they become better and better at planning, understanding, and applying the methods we give them from all the experts. Now let me show you this video with some examples from countries we work with. So have a look here.
Welcome to Fairstart's Group Care Instructor Education. Approximately 2.7 million children worldwide grow up in institutional care with little or no contact to their parents. Thus, the need for educating and training the people taking care of these vulnerable children is huge. Our education qualifies you to teach caregivers how they provide better care for abandoned, traumatized, and dysfunctional children and youth. The overall aim of the education is to give children a fair start so they have the best conditions for a bright future and are able to contribute to a better world. As an instructor, you work from a material that has already been used to improve the life conditions of more than 25,000 children around the globe. The education takes place in an online classroom where you will be guided through 8 modules by Niels Peter Rygaard. He is a child psychologist of more than 35 years, internationally recognized for his expertise in attachment theory. Each module consists of video and text material, as well as reflection assignments and group discussions with your fellow students. During each module, you meet physically with a group of caregivers and train them in 3-hour sessions. We will prepare you for your role as an instructor by providing theory about motivation techniques, learning strategies, group dynamics, and organizational development. This will enable you to teach caregivers about relation development, attachment theory, and secure caregiver behavior. However, you do not only communicate theory, you help caregivers understand the importance of implementing the theory, and you give them the practical tools to do so. Furthermore, you facilitate improved cooperation between the staff and their daily leaders, because research shows that children benefit tremendously from having adults around who agree with each other and who are able to handle conflicts in a constructive way. The teaching material, which has been tested in more than 15 countries, is based on everyday situations, and it shows consideration for local culture, making it easy for caregivers to recognize and identify with. This supports one of Fairstart's most important principles, that all participants, both instructors and caregivers, should be co-creators of their own learning and development processes. Upon completion of the course, you have earned a certificate and you become part of an international network of instructors. But most importantly, you have developed competences to continue helping caregiver staff to create positive changes in the lives of placed children. Sign up now and join us to help children save the world.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, our current partnerships, just to give you two examples. With SOS Children's Villages Denmark, they have a big project in East Africa. So we educate the staff from Zanzibar, Tanzania, Kenya, and Rwanda. We have, until now, we started in 2017, and now we have educated 50 instructors who have trained the poor foster and kinship families in those countries for 6 months each in attachment-based care. So we are up to having trained the caregivers of 5,000 children now. And this is much needed because governments, especially the government in Rwanda, they want to make this their official state program. So Fairstart will be spread even further. That's leverage for you, right? Well, that's one project. And one reason that they want it so badly is that, for example, in Rwanda, they reported that after the corona, there's a lot of unemployment in Africa, but after the corona, they have 3 times as many street children as they had before the corona started. And that's due to total unemployment all the way around for people who are poor anyway, right? That's a major disaster. And that happens in other countries also in Latin America. The other project I want to tell you about is for Greenland government. They came 3 years ago and said, kids do very badly in school, so can you make a cross-professional education for school teachers, for orphanage pedagogues, and school home pedagogues? And so we did. Now we have educated the first team from Upernavik and Sisimiut in Greenland, and they have trained their colleagues. They do it with the different groups together, and the outcomes are amazing. Well, the other project we are planning now is that I've been working a lot in Spain and in Chile, Peru, and Mexico, speaking at conferences and so on. And 2 years ago, Professor Eva Gomez from Cantabria University, she came and said, "Can't you make Spanish versions? Because practically no one in Spain or Latin America speaks English." So what we are planning now is that we made a partnership with an NGO in Navarra, northern Spain, and we'll develop the Spanish version for 2 years. That will comprise some 2,000 children, I guess. And then we are ready to partner up with a lot of Latin American organizations. I have great help from Arturo Esguerro. He is a Spanish psychiatrist working in London, and he's also a member of the Ibero-American Attachment Network. And well, I could mention 100 others, but I don't have the time. So let me just tell you that the slides that are following this presentation, you can find links to the Fairstart Foundation. You can try out a demo of our online education. You can open and use all the training sessions. I think we have some 15 or 20 topics. So you can see and you can use for yourself those training sessions. They are free of charge. And you have them in 20 languages. Now, I gotta leave you. Thank you so much for listening. I just have a small remark before I go, and that is, when I was 8, my dad, he gave me this 1922 Liberty silver dollar, and he said, "Tell me what's here." And I said, "That's a woman." And he said, "Yes, that is Mrs. Tedeschi, who was a very poor Italian immigrant who came into the country, and she modeled the face of the goddess of liberty on this coin." And I said, "Okay." And he turned the coin around, and then he said, "What do you see here?" And I said, "That's an eagle." And then he said, "Yeah, but can you see the letters?" "Yeah." And he said, "It says E pluribus unum." And he asked me, "Do you know what that means?" I said, "No." He said, "It means let's stand united." So let's stand united as psychologists against racism, against prejudice, against child neglect, and work for our ultimate goal to help children save the world, which is the motto of the Fairstart Foundation. I owe a lot of thanks to hundreds of people who made this possible for me. To my staff, we are 4 staff and a volunteer board. And in particular, I'd like to thank Robert McCall and Christine Grock from Pittsburgh University Office of Child Development, who have helped me all the way along. They helped us design the scorecards to measure caregiver development and child development. And I also want to send a special thanks to another guy who supported me a lot, Telmo Mourinho, the former president of the European Federation of Psychologist Associations. So I look forward to seeing your presentations and talk to you. And one thing you can be sure about is as soon as this Corona thing is over, I'll be back because I want to see the place where I was born in Ansonia. Okay, guys, have a great conference. Bye-bye.